vote. Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, again, I know the delegate had to step away, but I'm really happy he was able to join us, and we were able to hear some words from one of the climate champions that we actually endorsed, as you mentioned, during the primary. Of course, we re-endorsed him in the general election. And you all were able to see sort of the fruits of our labor in terms of being able to keep our allies that are climate champions in Annapolis and continue working with them over the years. So this year, CCAN Action Fund, Chesapeake Climate Action Network Action Fund, our C4, made the major decision to, for the first time, as many of you know, involve ourselves directly in electoral politics, specifically in Maryland. And I'm proud to say today that with the majority of the votes counted from last week across the state, a majority of our candidates that we endorsed won their races. It was a massive success. I believe 28 state senators and 76 House of Delegate candidates that we endorsed were elected in Maryland. And that's both re-elected in terms of incumbents and also elected for those that were running in districts as non-incumbents. That also includes 9 candidates whose races we were kind of more focused on and invested in significant resources into. For a number of reasons, we did that. These races in these districts we chose to invest into because of their importance within the state politically, in terms of like their committees that these candidates sat on, the importance of the geographic area in terms of work that we're looking at doing in the future, and work happening currently in their areas, but also where we thought we could make the most impact via the work that we were doing. And those 9 candidates were Congressman David Trone, Senator Kathy Klossmeyer, Senator-elect Karen Lewis-Young, Delegate Ken Kerr, Delegate-elect Karen Simpson, and Delegate-elect Chris Fair. Again, those were the 9 candidates who we really honed in on. Well, those candidates, as well as the statewide candidates, Wes Moore, Anthony Brown, and Brooke Learman. And thankfully, as I mentioned, all of them won their races, and even by a wider margin than I think we were expecting. We were getting a little worried at some of these races there towards the end, and especially after Election Day, when we were still waiting for early vote or mail-in ballots to get counted. It was a little touch and go there for a while, but we made a significant impact, I believe, on those races. And of course, that's all due to members and supporters and the staff working hard on behalf of those endorsed candidates. We were able to reach over 348,000 voters via phone calls, text messages, at their doors, in their communities and events, over social media, and at the polls on Election Day, where we actually engaged in-person vote tripling, getting over 300 voters to reach out to at least 3 people in their network directly while at the polling location. This means if somebody came out from voting and we had identified them as a person voting for our priority climate champion candidate, we said, hey, how about reaching out to 3 people right now via text or phone or email, reminding them to vote for our candidate? And over 300 people did that over the course of early voting and Election Day. These outreach efforts resulted in over 4,600 individual pledges to vote for our priority candidates, with 2,500 of those in Maryland District 3. So not only did we help elect our priority candidates, for context, District 3 is in the Frederick County area. So not only did that help elect our priority candidates and increase turnout in the vote count for our statewide candidates, but it very much certainly helped elect climate champions at the local level as well. And the good news is, that's good news as we look towards engaging in more policy work in Frederick County, which I hope we have more to talk about on future calls. So real quick, I'm going to put something in the chat so that you can, or James, or somebody's going to paste a question in the chat that I have that I'm really curious about. Of course, these last few days after the election, I've been really doing a lot of data analysis on the tactics that we utilized to inform voters of our candidates and to get them out to vote. And of course, different ways that people are actually voting here in Maryland. So I'm curious for you all, if you could answer in the chat how exactly you all voted, if you would indulge me answering that question. Did you early vote? Did you vote on Election Day? Did you mail in your ballot? Maybe how early you mailed in that ballot? Personally, I voted on election day, and it was a breeze. It was at a middle school here in Prince George's County. The volunteers were wonderful, as always. They're amazing. And there were people there, but thankfully there was not a significant line, and it was not, burdensome or anything like that. So I'm really interested. So we got some vote by mails, voted on election day. Great. Put it in your ballot box. Awesome. Yeah, and one thing that's really great is I come from Texas, and it's not so easy and not so clear cut the best ways to vote in some of these local areas, especially. Thank you. Well, while that's going in, one other follow-up that I have, kind of along the lines of that, is did you have any difficulties finding out how to vote in your preferred method? So if you voted by mail, was it hard to find the correct mailing address or the deadlines or, the specific dates where you could do that? If you were early voting, was it hard to find your polling location? Did you, what difficulties did you have in voting this election, if any? But while you were doing that, I'm going to go ahead and finish up some debrief about the election work. So beyond the numbers and beyond all of this data, it was really inspiring to me, and I know to the rest of our team, to see the passion and commitment to climate justice that our volunteers brought to the campaign. And I see a lot of you all that I work side by side with on this election work here on the call today. So thank you all so much for being here and for all that help. We had a mighty force of volunteers that ensured we were able to cover 14 polling locations, including 5 on election day, to do that vote tripling work, as well as phone bank for over 40 hours, text almost 30,000 voters, and participate in 10 separate days of canvassing. All of this happening in the month of October and like the first 9 days of or the first 8 days of November. So a really short period of time, all of this work was done, and it was done because of the amazing volunteers that we have here at Chesapeake Climate Action Network. We had dozens of volunteers throughout the primary as well, and some of those carried on through our general election programs, and we recruited new volunteers in the general election as well. Some of them returned week after week and really did everything they could to get these climate champions elected to make sure that we started this next year off strong. Volunteers from all age groups, walks of life volunteer. We had high schoolers. I think one of our really awesome volunteers was doing vote tripling, and he had his high school daughter with him. Another had their college daughter with them, and they were just taking a quick break from literally they took an exam and then came right out on election day to do some vote tripling. So I couldn't be more thankful for that. We had retirees doing phone calls. We had people texting. I had a college student tell me she was doing texts from her laptop while she was in lecture, like in a college lecture happening. So very, very appreciative of that. I don't know if I can't say I encourage that, but I'm certainly very appreciative of that and the time everybody spent doing that. I also want to give a quick shout out to the organizations that helped us in, supplying volunteers and manpower. Particularly, I want to lift up Sunrise Frederick, who really helped us expand the work that we did in District 3 by engaging their members. And again, just a huge thanks to all of the individual volunteers, all of the different organizations and organizers. Of course, thank you to the candidates for being great climate champions and being someone worth advocating for. The movement in Maryland, thankfully, to elect climate champions is going strong, and we have put our state on the path to being a climate leader, and we could have only succeeded with this collective support of all of you all and your commitment to climate justice. I just want you all to know and make sure that you understand that these wins aren't just the candidates' wins. They're not just CCAN's wins. These are your wins as well, and they're major wins for the climate. We saw some of the opposition, particularly in the gubernatorial race, and we maybe could expect how disastrous they could have been for our climate and climate policies, but I think it could probably likely would have been a lot worse than any of us could have expected. So thankfully, that is not the case. I learned so much from all of you. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional, and you'll know why in a second. But thank you so much again for all the work on this. Again, this was the first time CCAN ever did this. We're going to continue doing this work. You'll hear more about it in the weeks to come. But it was very successful in the primary, and it was, I would say, even more successful in the general. So before I wrap up here, the last thing I want to say before I hand it back over to Victoria, to give some more insight about the Maryland work, I just wanted to announce that I will actually be leaving CCAN at the end of the year. It's been a really incredible and productive 3 years for me. From when I started, I was organizing against Governor Hogan's investments in gas infrastructure. And that was like meetings with MDE and MEA, and it was kind of my first foray into specifically climate advocacy. And then, of course, now wrapping things up with the election and ensuring that we put our state into, our state's future in good hands. I've learned so much from everybody that I've worked with, both on staff and volunteers and our organizational allies. So I'm very thankful for that. Some of you know this already, but I moved here from Texas in March of 2019, and I didn't really know what to expect of the job or my coworkers or even like Marylanders. Being from the South, everyone's like, oh, people in the North are mean. And I know there's some contention of whether or not Maryland is the North or not. But I'm happy to say that Maryland and the climate movement in Maryland is full of amazing, talented, caring, and passionate advocates. And I could not be more grateful for the opportunity I've had to, work alongside all of you guys these last few years. For those of you that want to stay in touch with me, for those that I've connected with multiple times, or even for those that I've not had a chance to speak with directly, I invite you to reach out to me via email. We can exchange contact information, and then we can, continue maybe working together in the future. So thank you so much. Sorry, thanks for indulging me with that. Oh yeah, I have a little GIF here. So long, partner. I'll be here for a few more weeks. I'll be leaving like mid-December, so on and so forth, give or take. So thank you again, everybody. I really appreciate it. I'm going to put my email in the chat, and if anybody would like to reach out and stay in contact, please feel free to do that. Victoria?
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks so much for all of the great work you've done. This was our inaugural electoral program, and so it was very much Anthony's baby, and will certainly live as one of his legacies at CCAN. So just to give a little more context about the work that Anthony and so many of you all did with our CCAN Action Fund campaign, we knew that this was going to be a huge electoral year in Maryland and across the country. It was actually the first time that all 3 state level offices had open seats for a race since 2006. And we also, of course, had all of the Maryland General Assembly seats up for re-election. There were newly drawn districts, so many races were a little different than the last time the candidate had run, like Delegate Stein's race. And this meant that we had an opportunity to elect a new legislative and new administrative group of leaders. And we needed to ensure that climate was going to be a wedge issue for them. You may remember, if you've been part of this work with us, that we endorsed candidates based on their commitment to some of these key legislative initiatives. We had 100% clean electricity by 2035, investments in underserved communities, increased access to clean transportation, and strong labor provisions for major clean energy projects. We decided this was going to be a key issue because the next 4 to 8 years will be crucial in our climate movement in Maryland. We just passed an awesome piece of legislation that commits Maryland to reducing our statewide emissions by 60%. By 2031. And this administration and the General Assembly that we just elected are going to be responsible for implementing that legislation. So additionally, it's important to note, we talked a little bit with Anthony about this before, but as results are still trickling in, we're seeing that not only did we secure a statewide slate of climate champions, but we also unseated some legislators or defeated some candidates that have a known record, voting record that's contrary to our climate work. So for example, we are just now, the last couple of days, we've gotten early and mail-in ballots back in District 33. And Don Guile is projected to win in a district that could have very easily and has been a Republican district. And this Senate candidate, Sid Saab, has been a House delegate and voted against not only the Clean Energy Jobs Act, but the Climate Solutions Now Act. Likewise, in the House, we endorsed several candidates based on their support for our past record, as well as this slate of issues that we just talked about. In District 2B, a district that has traditionally been held by candidates and legislators who are not friendly to clean energy developments, we actually unseated that delegate for a candidate, Brooke Grossman, who has committed to all of these climate platform pieces. And this is a huge win because she's unseating a delegate who voted against climate solutions now. And we are looking at a new General Assembly body that is more climate conscious than we've ever had before. So these wins mean that we're going to be able to push further in this coming term, and with our new slate of leaders, the General Assembly clearly knows that climate issues matter and that voters are paying attention to climate, and that we want these true climate solutions and climate justice solutions in Maryland. So that is some of the context that we're working in. We knew this was going to be an important year, and we have seen a lot of success in Maryland. Very excited to work with the new administration and the new General Assembly. And of course, it was also a big year for federal elections. So I'm going to pass it over to Jamie now to talk a little bit about that.
Thanks so much, Victoria. Yeah, a lot of firsts on this election cycle, and that includes our first ever House congressional endorsements. And we decided to do this because increasingly at the federal level, our climate is on the line, but our democracy is also on the line. The Chesapeake Climate Action Network Action Fund recently added defending constitutional democracy to our mission statement, which I think when we were founded 20 years ago, we never could have imagined that that is something we would have to actually work to defend. But here we are today. And I'm really proud to work at an organization that doesn't just sit on the sidelines or say we've never done that before, so we're not going to do that, but we go where the action is, and we don't watch history get made, but we help shape history even from our region. And this election was close. I'm really proud of us for getting involved because it was super close, and it took everyone putting our hands on the scale to get it to go the right way. Whatever else happened, the margins are very, very thin everywhere across the country. To set the stage, very few people were predicting that. Overwhelmingly, people were predicting that candidates who support action on climate change and defending democracy would lose en masse, and that would embolden the rising authoritarian leaders in our country and thus set the stage for a stolen 2024 election. But that's not what happened. Instead, we put a screeching brake on the trend towards authoritarianism and pushed back on action on climate change and said, actually, climate is a winning issue and running on ending democracy is a losing issue, which I think nationally are two of the biggest takeaways. At the House level, what we did specifically in our region is we endorsed 3 House races in Maryland and Virginia, basically the 3 swing seats in our region: Trone in Maryland 6th, Spanberger in Virginia 7th, and Loria in Virginia's 2nd. And unfortunately, Loria lost, but the other 2 candidates won. And we turned out thousands of additional voters for them, and neither of them won by all that much more than that. So we feel really proud of the work we did. I actually got to see Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger this morning, and when I said I'm from the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, she said, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much. We are really grateful for all that you did out in the field for us." And so we are proud of the work that we did, and we have helped shape that narrative that climate is a winning issue nationally. There were exit polls done by the Washington Post that found that the #1 issue on voters' minds was the economy. Unsurprisingly, that mostly never changes. But tied for second were abortion and climate change. And those 2 issues were the second top priority for voters, according to this exit poll. And Gen Z and millennials came out and supported climate candidates and democracy defenders like never before in this election. And that really beat back that rising tide of authoritarianism that we were all afraid was going to come in this election. And we were able to run on climate because we helped pass the Inflation Reduction Act. And I think all of us at CCAN feel very proud, everyone who's involved in CCAN, members, staff, and volunteers alike, very proud of the work that we did to help pass that bill, to keep it at the top of Democrats' agenda, and to get Joe Manchin on board with it, despite all the kicking and screaming that he did. We specifically chose Congressman Trone's district as a priority district for our state work because we knew that we could get multiple benefits. So every single voter that Anthony was turning out for Senator Young was hopefully also voting for David Trone, who we also endorsed. And like I said, we got thousands of additional votes in Frederick County out for climate and democracy. In Virginia, we did similar good work in this. Just to go through the numbers really quickly, in Virginia's 2nd district, we dialed 47,000 people, texted 25,000. We got 5,000 pledges to vote. We vote tripled 377 times, which means more than 1,000 people got a message from a close friend or family member asking them to come vote. And we got more than 2.3 million Facebook impressions. And in the 7th district, 20,000 dials, 6,000 texts, and 2,800 pledges. We can actually look at the specific precincts where we were targeting and our allies weren't. And we can see that those precincts overperformed for our candidates compared to those same candidates 2 years ago. So we're really seeing the difference that CCAN is doing at that precinct level. So we are an organization that fights for climate change at the county, state, and congressional level, and we're bringing the power to bear in the elections in those regions. And I think that is the context that I have to share. And I'm going to kick it back over to James.
Okay, thank you all so much. Thank you, Anthony, Victoria, and Jamie. And we'll miss you, Anthony. And your hair is looking fantastic. So, you know, I appreciate the time, if no one else does, that you put into that. So we're going to go to questions and answers from y'all now. So there's 2 ways we can do this. You can do one or the other, either. If you want to, you know, hit the raise hand, then we can call on you to ask a question, or, you know, if you want to throw it in the chat, then we'll just kind of alternate between hands and chat, or see which one is more kind of fertile. So yeah, if you have questions for Victoria or Anthony or Jamie, now's the time. And I invite you to ask some questions.
And to clarify, I do have Electrify MoCo on my screen, but right now the questions are in relation to the electoral work and
Yes,
how that affects future policy work in Maryland. Rob has his, yep.
Oh yeah, I'm just wondering, since we have, you know, a new governor and comptroller, which I recognize is a pretty important position when it comes to climate as well. And it sounds like, you know, a larger majority in both houses, or I'm not 100% sure of that. What, you know, what legislative priorities does CCAN have, both coming up in the next legislative session, which is really just like almost tomorrow? It's in one sense, it's right around the corner because we're in holiday season now, so nothing really happens. And then all of a sudden, you know, it's just about time for the legislative session to begin. So I'm just wondering, what does 2023 look like? And then, you know, if you dare to provide any insights, what like 2024 might even look like. I'm just curious to know.
That's a great question. Thank you, Rob. So we have a lot of exciting news coming up in the next couple of weeks. We are launching a campaign to expand offshore wind in Maryland. Our December meeting, which is on December 8th, so mark your calendars, will be all about our legislative preview. So what we're doing in 2023 and what it means for our region. We're really excited because we're at this very pivotal moment in Maryland and federally for offshore wind. The Biden-Harris administration has initiated a goal of 30 additional gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. This is a really ambitious goal. This is, of course, nationwide. Maryland in the mid-Atlantic is going to have to be a huge part of that because we have a huge resource in offshore wind. Where we're located is a prime spot for offshore wind, not only because of the actual wind speeds in our region, but also because we have the infrastructure, the technological hubs, and the workforce to actually support that industry. So we're going to be working on legislation that sets an ambitious offshore wind goal, as well as initiates a process to start working on really transformative transmission investments. We have money coming from the federal government, as well as additional lease areas coming up for auction in the next year. That all points to offshore wind being a huge part of our clean energy goals and our clean energy mix, as well as the best way for us to put a dent in our emissions, really move away from fossil fuels in our electricity sector, and start implementing the emission reduction goals of Climate Solutions Now. So that's going to be our 2023 legislative priority, as well as some additional legislation related to Climate Solutions Now. And then moving forward, as the term moves on, is we're going to have additional clean energy goals. We have a lot of work to do to rebuild our state agencies in Maryland because we've had a lot of disinvestment. All of that is going to be stuff that we'll be working with the new administration and the new General Assembly on. Really exciting stuff coming forward. And it's going to be so exciting to have a governor and a administration that is not going to veto our priorities nearly as often as we had the last 8 years. This means that we don't need to get every single Democrat to vote for our legislation, as we've had to do in some years past, because we don't need to have that veto-proof majority as we have before. We could push a little further and really pass transformative policy. Rodney?
Good evening. Thank you all for inviting me. I appreciate it. My question is, I'm wondering how our new governor, feels about the maglev and the widening of our highways and all the things that Governor Hogan has been doing to destroy our environment. Because my agenda as far as protecting the environment is actually protecting the earth itself. We have a wonderful forested area that's the largest forested area in the Mid-Atlantic region, and that is the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center, next to wildlife and NASA property and some other properties. That is extremely endangered. And I've been working hard to save that area. But I'm wondering, maglev train wants to go right through there. And obviously that's not good for our forest. So I'm wondering, does anybody have any inclination of how Governor Moore is going to proceed on those issues?
So I'll start off with your question about the about highway expansion. So far, most of the statements that I've heard from Governor-elect Moore have been sort of measured in that response. He definitely is not coming out as strongly in support of expansion of highways as we've seen from Governor Hogan. But there have been times that I've heard him speak, as with some nuance around that issue. I think it'll be the job of advocates like ourselves and environmental and transportation advocates to make sure that he is considering the greenhouse gas emissions and the environmental impacts of those highway expansion projects. One thing I'm very excited for is I have not heard, and I heard him actually negate this and say how bogus of a strategy this is. I've not heard him say that highway expansion should be part of our greenhouse gas reduction plan, which is something that Governor Hogan has been pushing since he's been in office, that expanding highways will actually help us cut emissions, which of course makes absolutely no sense. This is something that Governor Moore has spoken out against, which is great. I know he also has been really supportive of expansion of MARC and some other, public transportation initiatives. And so that's something I'm excited for as well. I don't know if I actually know his stance on maglev, so I can definitely look into that.
So does the Climate Action Network itself see the maglev train as a clean energy, clean transportation? How do y'all feel about that?
Well, we haven't really interacted with that as much on the legislative side or advocating one way or another. Personally, that has been something that we would want to see as a key initiative, but that hasn't actually come up with most of our advocacy so far.
Well, I'll just fill you in. It absolutely is not clean energy or clean transportation
Thank you,
because
Rodney.
it goes so fast. It goes so fast, it has to run over everything in its path. It can only go in a straight line. And in order to make it go fast, it needs a large amount of helium, which is not a really abundant material. In order to cool the magnets to make it go at hyper speeds, it needs that. And so it's not environmentally friendly at all, period. It's just, it's a boondoggle that's going to destroy it's going to destroy my community, because I fought for 30 years to create a forest preserve in our community, and they want to literally go right through the middle of that forest preserve. So it would negate 30 work by myself and a lot of other people in our city.
Right.
So
Well,
we're fighting it as hard as we need help in that.
yeah,
fight.
thank you for your
So,
passion and your input on that. We appreciate it, Rodney, and thank you for your questions. It looks like there was a couple of questions in the chat, but I've got note that a lot of them were answered. But I do see Rich has his hand up as well.
Yeah, first of all, thanks to all of you, Victoria, Anthony, Jamie, and the whole team over there. Tremendous body of work. My question is about the Attorney General. Our outgoing Attorney General Frosch has been very aggressive on a number of kind of interstate compact type legal actions. And what are your thoughts about where Anthony Brown is going to come down and how aggressive he is going to be in comparison to the Frosch AG?
Jamie, I think this is right up your alley.
Well, I can say that I spoke with AG, or I guess Congressman Brown, when he was a candidate, and he promised me that he would sue the polluters. And he was very excited about bringing a case against the fossil fuel industry that knew and lied about the climate crisis and is responsible for the damage that they caused. And we look forward to giving him all the authority he needs to bring that case. AG Frosch's hands were tied because Governor Hogan would not give him the authority to bring that case. But we don't anticipate that being a problem with the Moore administration.
Fantastic. And if you don't mind, I have a second question, and that's about young voters. Young voters have such a high percentage of climate and justice issues being high priority. How do you see us reaching out better to younger voters to get them more engaged, get their voting percentages up from where they are now?
James has actually volunteered to go viral on TikTok. That's what I've heard.
Right.
Yeah, I got this whole belly dancing routine that I'm sure is going to take off.
Wonderful.
So it's interesting because I've heard a lot of different things about how young voters showed up this year in this election cycle. I think turnout was so much larger across age groups that they took up about the same fraction of the electorate, but they were coming out more than they usually do. So one of the things that I think is really important and is showing up in a lot of the polling, as Jamie alluded to as well, is that climate is coming up as a top issue for young people. Climate, protecting democracy, and abortion were key issues on this election cycle. And for young voters, climate is, of course, it makes perfect sense what's on their mind when they go to the ballot box. Jamie, do you want to talk a little bit more about your experience with this work?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And we did a lot of work on, I think college campuses are where a lot of magic happens. And we did a lot of great work with the students at William and Mary University in Virginia to get out the vote in Lauria's district. And that was a real pleasure because there was a whole bunch of folks who were doing all sorts of clubs and had all sorts of time and activity to come out and vote triple and text their friends. And also just being at the polls, talking to young people and telling them to vote triple, meaning text 3 friends and tell them to come out and vote, was helping. So we're doing what we can, but I think if there were an easy magic answer to that, Richard, someone would have done it and we would have won overwhelmingly a long time ago. But you're right, it's an important priority.
Yeah. Yeah. Anthony also could speak a little bit too. And I think he mentioned earlier, we worked a lot with Sunrise Maryland this year and Sunrise Frederick specifically.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for the climate movement specifically. I think maybe uniquely the climate movement has developed, or we've seen a lot of really amazing youth-led organizations prop up for the climate movement, like Fridays for Future, Sunrise, are 2 really great examples. And I think the responsibility really is with traditional climate organizations and environmental organizations like CCAN or Sierra Club or LCV to ensure that we're not steamrolling these young people, especially as they're kind of getting their footing and they're learning what it means, what activism means to them and how they really want to advocate for their issues and their priorities. And even allowing the opportunity to our organizations and our, experience to amplify and empower them as they find their footing in this world. Of course, young people are the future. I say young people as if I'm not a young person. I still feel like I am. I'm only 26. Am I still a young person? I don't know.
Yes.
But, thank you. But something I know, what I would say as a young person, and what I hear from a lot of young people is just they want to own the work and they don't want to be told like, hey, you're just now getting here. We've been doing this for years and we know what we need to do. The brunt of the climate crisis is going to be bared by my generation and younger generations the most. So they certainly need their voices as part of the conversation, and we just need to make sure to respect that and don't stand in their way.
Yeah, just really quickly on that, I think delivering is the biggest thing. That we delivered really big federally on climate this year, and people noticed. And I think a lot of people aren't interested in just coming out to vote to someone because of the letter next to their name. People are interested in knowing whether their life is going to be meaningfully improved. So that's what we do here at CCAN, is help make sure that things actually get done.
Yeah, I would like to just chime in. In my experience of working at CCAN, I'm always impressed with the opportunities that we can give young people, whether it's rallies or supporting the work that they're doing in the Electrify campaign, whether it was in Montgomery County. So many students got involved writing letters to their council members, and we really uplifted the work that they were doing in Howard County, giving students a space to speak at events. I think CCAN really values the voice of young people and know that they have a precious story to tell with a lot of conviction. And so I personally am proud of the work that CCAN does with the youth. And, I think that as an organizer, a younger voice at the table always adds. So I'm really proud of the fact that we do that.
Okay, thank you, Monica. And while I have you here, Monica, if there's no more questions, I don't see any more. So to move on.
I have a question.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Ron Bethea, and I'm president of the National Association of Blacks in Solar. And we produce a nationally syndicated podcast called Solar Now and the Future with its Economic Impact on Black America. Now, I know that CCAN does excellent work. I followed the organization for a while. But what's interesting to me is the lack of information about the utility companies deactivating the data sharing option on 14 million rooftop solar residents in this country. And it's affecting Maryland residents. And I haven't heard a mumbling word from any of our candidates about this. I live in Prince George's County. I recently had a gentleman who owns a solar installation firm here on my podcast, and we were discussing the fact that we got 22, 23 counties in the state, but only 4 counties have an incentive if you're going to put a PV system on the roof. Now, in Prince George's County, it's supposed to be $6,200. Problem is, I'm 70 years old, and they got an 11-year waiting list. Only 4 counties have that initiative. So I'm just trying to find out, with all of this great work that's coming out with so-called public policy, with these trillions of dollars coming out of these federal agencies, where's the Justice 40 for low and moderate income residents in the state? Because I'm not saying it's not happening. I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Ron. And that's an excellent question. I don't have the answer for it. If someone does, feel
I can
free.
speak a little bit about some of the work we're doing on it. So, you know, like you said, there's all this money coming from the federal government, and there's supposed to be a Justice 40 requirement for those funds. One of the tricky parts about that is that depending on the different grants, they go to different agencies, and there are different eligibility requirements and all of this crazy things that need to be figured out. One of the things that we're working on in the General Assembly is putting in legislation that requires the agencies to actually uphold that Justice 40 requirement. Because if the money is given to the state agencies in a lump sum from the federal government, we need to make sure there's an enforcement mechanism that actually requires those state agencies to allocate that with the Justice 40 requirement as well. So that's one thing that we've been working on actually a couple of years now, trying to pass that legislation. I know Jamie also can speak a little bit more on the federal side, though we are coming up on time. But Ronald, I would love to have a more conversation with you about how to specifically do it around solar, because you're right, an 11-year waiting list, that's insane. And we do need to be incentivizing and making rooftop solar more accessible. That's definitely something that needs to be a priority.
And I just wanted to say thank you for the question, Ronald. And I'm curious, could you share a link to your podcast to me, either via my email or if you want to paste it in the chat? I appreciate it.
Great. Well, thanks again. We're going to jump over to Monica for a quick update on our electrification building work in Montgomery County. And I realize not everybody on the call is from Montgomery County, but rest assured these efforts will come to your county soon. So it's a good, I think there's a good blueprint there, and I think Monica's been doing pretty amazing work. So she's going to chat about that briefly. So to you, Monica.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll just, we're coming to an end here, so I'll just take a few minutes. I want to start by saying that this Electrify work started with Anthony, and I took over for Anthony when he did the electoral work. So thank you, Anthony, for planting the seeds here. So we're very close to passing a bill in Montgomery County for all new construction to be all electric, meaning no fossil fuel infrastructure going into new buildings. This is a climate solution. This is a really important bill because it's a climate solution. 50% of carbon emissions come from buildings. So to clean up the building sector, the first and easiest thing to do is to stop building buildings with fossil fuel infrastructure. We are super close. We have 5 votes in the council, but what we don't have is an assurity from the council president that the vote will be scheduled. We have one more chance, November 29th, to vote on all electric new construction for Montgomery County. It's a bill that thousands of Montgomery County residents really care about. We have had hundreds of emails My good friend Rob is here. We've knocked on hundreds of doors. We have hundreds of petitions. However, the utilities are quite powerful, and they've come to the table and they've had too much say, and too much say in the ears of council members. So we're really struggling. We're struggling this last couple of days to get this bill up for a vote, because November 29th is the very last day of session. So if you're from Montgomery County, you need to email your council members. Specifically, you can go to the full council at county council montgomerycounty.gov, and you can email all of them. And what you need to say is put 1322 up for a vote. Or you can specifically email Andrew Friedson from District 1, Tom Hucker from District 5, or Nancy Navarro from District 4, and ask those council members to ask the council president to put the bill up for a vote. We have the votes, but if the president doesn't put it up, then we lose. And when we lose, Maryland loses. Montgomery County needs to pass this bill so other counties can follow suit. Howard County is on the call, Frederick County is on the call, and eventually the state of Maryland. So if we pass it, Montgomery County will be the 3rd county in the whole country to have all electric new construction. It's huge and it's important, and it's a low hanging fruit. It's a solution, and the utilities are coming out strong and swinging. So we have to make sure we're heard. So if you have any questions, email monica@chesapeakeclimate.org tonight. We have just a couple of days, people, to get this passed. So please, if you're in Montgomery County, call, email, even if you've already done it, do it again. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Monica, for that. So it's 8. We're gonna wrap it up. If I'm gonna put my email in the chat, if you want to get more involved with CCAN, if you want to know more about what we're doing, if you want to become an action member, all the great things we've been talking about, like knocking on doors. No, I'm kidding. But if you want to do any of that stuff, definitely, you know, that's what makes all the change happen is people power. So we would love to have you more involved. If you have questions, or if you have ideas that you don't think we're considering right now that you think we should, I would love to hear them. Everybody's email is, most people's emails are in the chat. So feel free, if you don't want to reach out to me because you don't like my windswept hair, feel free to reach out to Victoria, because her hair is. And I really appreciate everybody's time and energy being on the call. And unless anybody has anything else, we just, yeah, you know, y'all are the ones making this happen and making this work possible for CCAN and you to do. So really thank you, and we really appreciate you.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight, everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you. Good luck,
Thanks.
Anthony.
Thanks, everybody.
Victoria, can you stop the recording? I can't for some reason.